So, welcome to the Play Myself Show. I'm Miles. I'm here with Daniel, and we're gonna talk Haiti. Just because my mom, Marie, she actually Daniel's a high school friend of hers, and she kind of said, if you, because I always call my mom about everything that's on my mind, and I'm like, all right, mom, I'm thinking about Haiti. And she's like, well, I'm gonna put you through to a friend of mine that I think knows what you know and can educate you. And like she knows that I'm always down for that. So this is awesome. So Daniel, tell us about yourself.
Well, let me see, I was born in Haiti, left Haiti at 9 years old in 1973, October 1973. So I've been here for 47 years, believe it or not. Seems like yesterday. And of course, since I left at 9 years old, there's, so much you could learn, by the age of nine. But almost everything I've known about Haiti, I've learned when I college, and since then I've been reading a whole lot of books on Haiti, and I've learned, I guess, everything that I've known about Haiti in my adult life. And it always amazes me that the more I learn about Haiti, the more I start to understand the importance of the Haitian Revolution and all of the things that Haitian people have done. But my life, basically, I could say I'm an electrical engineer, been an electrical engineer now for the past 33 years. So I'm an electrical engineer, I'm a Freemason, an American veteran, a Marine, and always a proud Haitian. I'll be a proud Haitian till I die.
When we got to talking the other day, and what really made me interested about like doing this show is we kind of had a lot of the same perspective on, you know, maybe it was like the whole like what was going on in the American politics or whatever. But being Haitian, like you, I've always took what happened in Haiti or what I thought what was going on in Haiti as it was supposed to happen. And then as I became older and I educated myself, I was like, man, like we kind of had it the way it should have been, but something else happened that kind of shifted the thought, whether it be in Haiti to Haitians or in America now to Haitian Americans. And it was something that I needed to dig into. Cause like I read about like Toussaint Louverture and Dassalim, and I'll go in on like, oh man, like how could these dudes be so smart and let this happen to them? And how does a nation become so crippled, but the first republic to ever stand in this hemisphere, you know?
Yep. And I think that part, that's something that a lot of people, even I would say, see, people in Haiti would know a lot about it, but a lot of people here and around the world may not know too much about because a lot of the history has been suppressed. Just to give a quick rundown, we know the Haitian Revolution took 13 years from 1791 to 1804. From the inception of the Haitian Revolution, Haiti, as small as it is, has always sought to make changes, not just in Haiti, but throughout the world. And the leaders of the Haitian Revolution have always said that this Haitian Revolution, we cannot keep it here in Haiti. We must spread this revolution throughout the world and free the rest of the world. Wherever there are enslaved people, it must be our goal to free those people. A lot of people have heard about Simon Bolivar, talk about the Bolivarian Revolution, but a lot of people don't really know the connection of Simon Bolivar to Haiti. Because in 1815, when Simon Bolivar wanted to free, this was 11 years after the Haitian Revolution ended, 1815, he wanted to free South America, which was then called the name will come up, Grand Granada, wanted to free South America. He went there in 1815 to fight the Spanish in Cartagena. which is now part of Colombia. And he basically got his butt whipped. He lost to the Spanish. 1816, he went to Haiti to ask for help. And the president of Haiti gave him a place to stay, gave him refuge, and sent him back with more than 4,000 rifles, ammunition, and also skilled tacticians in warfare who had just fought the Haitian Revolution, sent him back to South America. He lost again. He came back to Haiti for the second time, requested for more help. So they gave him more arms, but this time gave him a lot of soldiers with more tacticians who went back to South America, and he was successful. Now, the Haitian president then said he only wants one thing in return. He said, every country that you free in South America, ensure that they abolish slavery. And Simon Bolivar kept his word. He freed 6 countries in South America and made sure that it is in their constitution, every country that was freed, that they abolished slavery. So he freed Panama, Nicaragua. The first one that he freed was Venezuela, which is where he was from. Freed Venezuela, Panama, Colombia. Last one was Bolivia. And let me see, 6 countries. Honduras was one of them. And there's one more. The name will come back to me soon. But he made sure that in every single one of those countries, it is listed in the Constitution that as of today, slavery would be abolished. And that was one thing that America at that time wasn't too happy with, because even though the Spanish, they were competitors with America, but America still wasn't happy because slavery was still part of American life. So the news of this Haitian Revolution in Haiti, and then the Haitians had the audacity to spread it throughout the Americas, throughout South America. That news, they try to suppress it as much as they can. But the news still made it to America, because 7 years after the Haitian Revolution in 1811, you had what's called the German Coast Rebellion in Louisiana, which was started by Charles Delande, who was a Haitian enslaved person who was relocated to Louisiana, but he refused to remain a slave. So he started one of the largest revolutions that the Americas have ever seen.
I heard about that. Somebody snitched or something, right? What was it? Like
What's that?
somebody told it, was that it? Like somebody told that like what was going on, and then like they stopped it in like South Carolina or something like that.
Yes. Yep. And if you notice, in most revolutions, most rebellions, did not succeed because other Black people who were indoctrinated in slavery would turn them in. And one of the main reasons why the Haitian Revolution was successful, because as soon as the revolution began, the leaders of the Haitian Revolution said, okay, we must take care of the traders first. So all of those people whom they thought, would have the slightest inkling to turn them in to the slave masters, they got rid of them first. And that was one of the main reasons why the Haitian Revolution was success. I mean, there are other reasons also, but that was one of the main reasons.
See, when I look at it, I look at it a little bit different. Then, like I look at it like so. Toussaint Louverture, right? He had like such a discipline to his way.
Hmm.
He wouldn't like allow for like cheating on your wife and like different things that just like kept a man focused. That
Yes.
you know certain things wouldn't happen, even though I think
Yep.
that he did have some type of naivete towards him, and I can't fault
Hmm.
human as a man. And I look at like during the revolution or after the revolution, I look at Dassalegne's way as a little bit more forward thinking. But the way
Yep.
that Toussaint led the force, and he picked the elite men. And you're a Marine, so you know like there's a difference, right? Because some men are going to be able to do it, and you can tell, you can look at them and say, okay, this dude is not meant to be here.
Yep. So the discipline was there and the drive for freedom was there, that they said nothing would stop them.
Yes. And
Yep.
when I look at the American Revolution as a special, when because like I read a book from Thaddeus Russell, and he was talking about how there was many rebellions against slavery, but even after the Civil War, there were many slaves that wanted to go back because that's what they knew. But now,
Hmm.
as you say, what you say about like how like those deals were made and those agreements were made, it was more of so like a fear, and people have a fear of the unknown, right? So like what they know is what they think is best because they don't feel like they can care for themselves, and that's what causes them
Hmm.
not to educate themselves and not to do whatever they have to do.
And that was a big part of the indoctrination. Once the enslaved people became indoctrinated, that's all they knew. They became almost like zombies. And they were afraid, even if somebody came to free them, because they knew nothing else, they had the fear in them that, no, 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 I want to stay where I am. I'm very happy where I am because they didn't know any better.
Right. So what's happened in Haiti? Do you think? Do you think that was just Tucson's discipline, or because to me Tucson was he was smart in a way. I feel like he trusted the other side so much, but at the same time he felt like okay he looked at slavery like a level. He didn't look at it like it was anything else but a level. He's like, look, once I get like I'm a king. Once I get out of this, nobody can
Mhm.
tell me anything because he had slaves. So he was like, all right, that slavery is more of a mindset than a way of life.
Yes, I agree. But I think there was another mindset that the leaders of the revolution made sure that they got away from because before the revolution began, Bookman, who was a voodoo priest, Bookman told them, before we even start this revolution, whatever it is that the slave masters had taught you, we need to get rid of our mind. So the first thing we need to do, the religion that they gave us, let's get that religion out of our mind because it's basically corrupting our minds. And not to say anything wrong about Christianity or any other religion, but they made sure that, listen, any religion that gave you a false image of God and of the saints, and when none of these people look like you need to drop that religion now. And that's what they did. And that's what the ceremony in Wakaima was all about, dropping the slave master's religion, getting rid of it because it was corrupting people's minds. Because it's that same religion that tells you if they slap your left cheek, yep, give them the right cheek so they could slap it. But then if you're dealing with immoral people, they'll be more than happy to slap you day and night. They don't care. See, the thing was Toussaint believed in morals, and he also believed in the honor system. But unfortunately, the honor system only works with honorable people. People who enslave other people for profit, these are not honorable people. And that's why Toussaint had trusted them. He figured, okay, I'm going to sign a treaty with them. So they invited him over to go sign a treaty. And as soon as he got there, they captured him. And
I think of myself like a philosopher, like before his time, right? So the person
mhm,
I like in Tucson too the most is like a J. I love American presidents, right? Cause it's like how to like not that I love them, but I just love how they shape them to become this thing, right?
mm,
So when I look at Tucson, I kind of like take him like JFK, and it's something I always say in my podcast, like how there was a writer Claire Booth who told JFK, a great man is always one sentence, right? And he was like, you're doing so much. Be present. Be one sentence. And she's like, Abraham Lincoln can say he freed the slave, like whatever anyone can say, right? So when I
mm,
look at Tucson, man, like he didn't really have to do what he did. And Haiti could have been the best kept secret, right? But we know Tucson, he has slaves. He's the only African American in the American Constitution with the Locator Clause, all because of his cleverness, right? So when you talk
mhm.
about Bookman and how like his mindset changed, then you say, okay, all right, he sent his wife to America. His wife talked to Thomas Jefferson. Whatever happened, he needed the trade to go on. What do you think made him? Because he's a smart man. Like, what do you think made him want to go to Europe? What made him want to go to back to France to make a deal? Or is that? Or am I understanding it wrong?
I think basically, like I said before, he believed in the honor system, and he really thought that he can actually go and sign a treaty with the French. That after everything the French went through on that island, and after beating the French so many times in the past 13 years, when the French told him, okay, well, we give up, it's time for us to sign a treaty, he actually believed them. He sincerely believed them. I guess he, you know, dropped his guard for a little bit. He believed that these were actually honorable people, but it turned out they weren't. And Dessalines had warned them. Dessalines said, do not trust them. Do not ever trust them. You know, Toussaint felt different and he said, no, this is something that I must do so we could have peace. And he went and they just captured him. And Dessalines was right.
So this is where my history leaves me. Like, so what happened after that? Like, when was there a trial in France? Did Toussaint get tried with, like the big debt that I feel like when I talk about like not reparations, I want to call it atonement. That like when I hear like Haitian Americans saying, "Oh, people owe this for slavery," I'm like, look, if anything, the French who are like acting like they on whoever's bandwagon, they owe me that because you can count me when it comes to you win a war, you lose a war. But for Haiti to be charged with these crimes that they say quote unquote crimes, and to still be paying a debt for those crimes, and to still leave a country in shambles,
Mm-hmm.
for them to have the goal to come on a campaign like a BLM or whatever after you did this for so many years to a nation, it, it's the craziest thing to me. I don't know,
Yeah,
maybe me.
yeah, but I mean that's how it was back then. And the Haitian people, they wanted to be recognized as a free and sovereign nation. But a few countries got together, including France, England, United States, Canada, and they said, we will never recognize you until you pay France for the revenue that they lost on that island.
Oh wow.
And that deal wasn't made until 1825 under President Boyer. So it wasn't Toussaint or Dessalines that made that deal.
Oh,
Yep, that deal was made under Boyer just to get the recognition. They agreed, to pay what I would call a ransom, basically.
oh wow. That's what my miseducation. I thought that it was at Toussaint's trial where that was figured out. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, you did that.
But then, I mean, it could have been, because I don't have much details about the trial. I mean, it could have been mentioned back then, but that deal wasn't made until very late in 1825, which was 21 years after the revolution had ended in 1804.
So one of the most interesting things to me is because what made me interested in just like even learning about this is when I was about to have my son, I was like, man, I don't know
Mhm.
anything about Haiti. And so my godfather, his name is Joel, he was telling me that, he came down and he was telling me like all about Haitian history while we were like while he was helping me build my studio. And he was telling me how, you know, this is what we learned in school. And I was so naive to think that, what? Like I thought that everyone learned American history in school, and
Hmm.
yeah, it's crazy because I was born in America, and I lived here for 30, 30 plus years. I'm in the military, but it was so weird because the next time this caught me is when like I tried to buy some art from Haiti, and the artist was like, "Well, this is Dassaline." And I was like, okay, dude, I know more about Dassaline than you. And he was like, he's like, I learned this in third grade. And I was like, oh wow. But
Hmm.
it was so crazy that, because my mom's Haitian, and for me not to understand that, you know, that other countries didn't teach American history, and like that was surreal to me. And then when my godfather showed me about, he was like, well, this is what happened according uh to his learning. And but he was around since like I want to say like in the 70s when he knew about like not the, is it the Toto Makut, where they was
Yep.
like around, and he was like, yo, this dude would come around and be like, yo, like, you bought that girl for me. And it was like crazy. And like they would just like
Hmm.
you and take your generator. And I was like, wow, like how did that happen? Make the long story short, like what do you think caused the loss of like the honor system? Like, because I feel like Toussaint Louverture, like as a male, like that as a person, that was a very perfect place to have your value system.
Hmm.
But where do you think it changed?
Yeah, I'm sure it didn't change overnight. I'm sure it took a long time before it changed, but there was a major change, say 1915, in what in America they would call the Banana Wars. And of course, way back from 1899 under the Monroe Doctrine, when they had the Spanish American War, under the Monroe Doctrine, it was determined that, okay, well, they took over Cuba, they took over Philippines, took over Hawaii, all of these locations that were controlled by Spain and other countries. But then in 1915, America decided, okay, well, they must go into the West Indies and basically make it their sphere of influence to make sure that no other country from Europe would take over the West Indies because it's in America's backyard. And the reason they call it the Banana Wars from 1915 to 1930, they call it the Banana Wars because that area was very fertile for the raising of bananas. At that time, the company that controlled most of the banana plantations throughout the Americas was the Chiquita Banana Company, which was eventually called United Fruit, same company. It was mainly because of them that American Marines went throughout the Americas, went throughout the Caribbean, and basically controlled it for 19 years. Now, once America left in 1934, they left in place of a puppet government that would be controlled by America. And since then, it has been nothing but a successive list of puppet governments controlled by America. If any leader would ever dare to speak out against America or speak about reparations or try to do something for the people, they would be overthrown. This coup d'etat would be sponsored by overseas governments to ensure that we'd have nothing but puppet governments in Haiti from that time on.
Right,
So
right.
I don't think it's a problem with the people losing the honor system or losing morale, because the way things work in politics, if you need to control 6 million people, you don't need to control each and every single person. You just put your own person in charge who will do all of the dirty work for you, and your hands remain clean. So for the past, you know, 80, 90 years or so, we've been blaming all of the successive Haitian governments. They haven't done enough, they haven't done this, but they've all been under the control of overseas governments.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, out of 6 million people, I'm saying 6 million because back then had, 5 or 6 million. Now we're up to, I believe, 9 million. You can always find, 10 or 15 people who are more than willing, to sell out their own people just for power, fame, and security. And that's what's been happening.
It's funny you say that because so I went to Haiti in 2017 for a tech conference. There was a Forbes 30 under 30 female who happened to be Haitian, and she challenged all of the winners to go to Haiti. So I met a lot of cool people there. Like one of the best times I ever had. It was real easy vacation. I call it a vacation, but it was like really like a networking event, and I got to like life coach some people, and it was just really influential, like for me, right? Because I felt like I could take over Haiti at that time I was there. Like as I was that inspired. But I met the president, and the funny thing is like, but I met a lot of like white Haitians, like okay, like
Hmm.
dudes that like I wound up like hanging out with the most, and it was like really ironic because they were the only people like, and I went down, I had my wedding ring on. They were the only people that thought that I wasn't trying to like take their girl, and like it didn't even have no,
Hmm.
but like all of like the young women, like they let me coach them, whatever. And like we worked on like because they would like all have proposals to Google at the time. So what they told me though was like they were Haitian born, although they were white, they still considered themselves Haitian. And like they had and like they were in their 20s, like lower 20s, and they had successful rum companies, right? So they would run throughout the Caribbean and South America, and like that was their thing. And it was like they were well off. Like they were just there, like hanging out, like trying to like find American people to like sell. Hopefully, I had a bar, and they was just trying to like give me some rum. And I still got a couple of these guys' numbers. But the interesting thing was what they told me was at the port. I forget what port it was. It wasn't Port-au-Prince. It was another port. They said it would take them so long because they were white to get like what they need. They would love to have, and it wasn't offensive to me, but it was like they would love to have, somebody like me who spoke a little bit of Creole, but enough to where I could relate to them. But even though they were Haitian,
Hmm.
spoke English, but they were like, well,
Yep.
get their product faster so they can make more rum because they said they were
Hmm.
waiting days sometimes because of the intimidation, right? Or what they perceived as intimidation. But then as I went to the conferences, this guy told me, he said, look, all you need is a 7-person shirt line. So he said, if you it's seven, it's a sew line. He said, all you have to get is 7 people that will work 7 days a week, and you can sell shirts to America and make all the money you needed. Right. And I was like, all right, let's do it. But he was like, look, it's hard for Haitians to work for Haitians. And I said, what do you mean? I said, well, I'm not Haitian then, right? They were, and he's like, nah, you look like them. But then I didn't believe what he was saying to me because this is like in a networking event until that night. They said, okay, everybody that's Haitian in here, raise your hand. Everybody that's American in here, raise your hand. Every Haitian find an American and go tell them your idea and you'll network together and this person's gonna make your life work. Right? When I was doing it, these dudes that I was trying to take their girls. I'm here trying to help you like figure this out. Because I know I told you the other day, but I'll tell you for context for this. The biggest problem in Haiti is e-commerce, right? There's no e-commerce, zero at all.
Wow.
That and there's no postal system, right? So everything is like pull and pray. You have to trust. But like I know, Haiti's poor, but there's people there with money, right?
Lots of money.
Lots.
Yes.
What I learned when I was there is like a flight from Haiti to Miami. If you have a good green card is or visa is $50, right? So there are people who would pay people just to go grocery shopping. You'll see people coming off the plane with groceries nowadays because they have it, right?
It's
You won't
amazing, huh?
to Haiti unless you go to somebody house and they got ketchup. But that's like a sign of I'm above. And I'm like,
Hmm.
where did that start? Because I seen it the whole time I was there. I met this, and this is my last story before I know I'm going. But I met this kid. He was 15 years old. He would go to Miami and spend 3 grand on sneakers because he would these guys would like have like a pirated internet and they would see what sneakers are coming out and they just want to have the new sneakers, American sneakers, He would go with $3,000. He would do it for like $1 or $5. I said, dude, you're gonna die. But they don't have the internet. So they have the internet so they can see, but they can't buy.
Wow. You see?
But that keeps it like this. That keeps it up and down.
Yeah, see, I mean, with me, the last time I was in Haiti was 1999.
Mm.
Haven't been back to Haiti since. Because I came in 73. And the first time I went to Haiti was February 1999. I went for Carnival. I spent a week. I enjoyed myself so much and I just wanted to go back. So in August 1999, I went back for 2 weeks for what they call Fête Champêtre, which is a pretty big celebration throughout the entire country. I went to Tigouave for Fête Champêtre, which is August 15th. I was there for 2 weeks and, did a little bit of traveling and realized that, wow, I mean, the place really needs help. Because me as an electrical engineer, I went to visit a plant, an electrical plant in Tigouave. The type of machines that they were still using built-in spindles, as for their generator system. I'm like, wow. And I was asking myself, is it that the country cannot import generators? Regular size generators, whether it's 300 or 500 kilowatts, which is not all that big. For whatever reason, whatever the politics is, whether it's for tariffs reasons or whatever, or trade surplus reasons, they don't have enough generators.
I think it's two things.
Hmm.
So there with the regime that was there before, if you
Hmm.
symbolism is big, right? So
Yep.
I forget his name, but he made everybody bring their generator in the square and burn them. So
Now,
Haiti's,
now, what year was that?
I want to say it was in my grandpa, so it was in the 70s, late 70s,
Oh,
right?
yeah, that was under Duvalier.
Duvalier did that, right? So everybody bought the generators in the square. So that visual is crazy, right?
Hmm.
Then after that, till this day, the lights go off in Haiti at 8 o'clock. Till this
Yeah.
right now, right? But
Yep.
you have a generator. So if you have a generator, again, it's that symbolism. So people say,
Yep.
"Oh, you can buy a generator." So this when you're doing this, the push pull thing,
Hmm.
like nobody's involving. Like nobody's saying, "Oh, wait, this is that." Because if I know you're an electrical engineer, I'm saying, Daniel, can you send one? I'm not saying like let's build all of them,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Fact of the matter is, if you go there, it's still like a gangster ran place to where like
Yes.
you can't go there and say, "Oh, this is bad. I'm gonna do this," because like when I was in Haiti in 2017, the news and it reminds me so much of like um the Vietnam War, right? Because when I
Hmm.
look at like Lyndon Johnson and like I study like what was going on in the war,
Hmm.
the news is casted in every bar because I was going to the bar. I was having a good time in Haiti,
Yep.
right? But all you hear is the news, but no
Yep.
context. It's just but it's extra loud. You would hear music, but then you would hear vole, vole. Yeah, I mean you're like,
Hmm.
oh man, and then they show our faces. So that fear that comes with that, and like you look at the president now, he's like a young dude, and you're like,
Yep.
he's a nice enough person, and I believe his heart might be in the right place. But then when you see he owns X amount of hundreds of acres of banana fields, it brings it back to what you said earlier.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I think, I mean, throughout the years, we've had a lot of presidents with very good intentions, but then I guess once they get in power, they realize that there's only so much they could do. Because, I mean, a lot of times it's like running up against a wall. Problem is, if your economy depends on, other countries overseas to support you, then you're basically, you're endowed to them. So whatever they tell you to do, you have to do. And I think that's part of the biggest problem.
I'm gonna look at Bookman because that's one name that you told me that I never really looked into, and I'm
Yep.
gonna look at, like some of the things he said because the same way you say about you know the indoctrination in the brain and like that's what Tucson wanted to get out of, and that's what Bookman
Hmm.
to the fight. To me
Yep.
power in that. I used to think that my uncles were just like bad men, right? My
Hmm.
great uncles was just bad men when they just was like had this fascination with women so much to where it was like, okay, you have like not even like megalomaniac type of way, but more
Yeah.
of a woman can't disrespect me. It was just like a ultra alpha male type of
Ultra machismo.
machismo, yeah, machismo type way. That's the perfect
Yep.
way, right? But then when I saw it in 14-year-old kids, 15-year-old kids, it started to make me feel like, look, dude, I'm obviously older than you. Look at me like a threat. There's something that you were taught. These guys were giving me so many good ideas, but then as soon as a female walked by, they didn't want to talk about it.
The question is, I mean, that type of mentality, do you see it also in Black Americans or is it just in Haitians?
I would say this. I see it in Black Americans a lot. I pay attention to Haitians more. So when I say this, I
Yeah.
say this. In a Black American, right? You have two types to me, as far as I'm concerned. You have a dude
Hmm.
that like is like either super submissive to what he sees, and then
Hmm.
to like his where his wife is, and I just kind of say that to Haitians too. But then, or you have somebody that just like has a total disregard. So with a Haitian man is like this, he's gonna take care, like everything has to be his. Like he can
Yep.
have one girlfriend, two girlfriend, three girlfriend, but he's taking care of all of them.
Hmm.
So a Black American is like, okay, yo, give me that, give me this. I'm taking from you, and
Yep.
it's more trickery, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the difference I see, right? But it's a mentality, but it's also like I look at it like it's not always a bad thing because I feel like, as a man, as a king, maybe you might say, okay, I can have the kingdom and this is all mine. And this is why I'm telling you, don't mess with that. And let's get this out the way first. It might be
Hmm.
my cybernetics that's just like, okay, it was weird to me because like I'm come from a capitalistic society. So when somebody's talking money, I'm thinking about the money first. But they
Yeah.
might subconsciously in Haiti, it might be like, oh, I'm gonna pillage this whole land.
Hmm.
They might be on a different frequency than I am.
Yep.
I just don't know. And that's what makes me curious. And that's why I have this conversation with you. You see what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
my mom and I went in 2012, 2011, right after earthquakes. And although it was like the craziest thing I ever saw.
Hmm.
I saw the happiest people ever. I ate the best food
Yes.
ever.
Yep.
I slept on the floor 2 nights, but it was like the best sleep ever. Nobody was worried about money. Everybody was just upbeat. The food was good. I play the Chanel still to this day, and I was
Hmm.
going to the shop by myself and doing that.
Yep.
I didn't see it like everyone else, but it kind of gave me that awakening, like, oh, I'm a capitalist because I'm American, and I love how we deal with things because I love to want to build, but some
Yeah.
people like it regular.
Yeah. I mean, and at times you wonder the way, I guess, the people act. Is it because of misplaced priorities? And for the guys who seem to be, it looks like their main goal is to collect women and have as many women as they can. You wonder if they're doing it, I guess, just to compensate for what they feel is a lack of their manhood. A couple of 100 years of slavery, where the man, black man, was basically not allowed to be a man. Once slavery is over, a lot of these people, I guess, they correlate manhood with sexuality.
I can see that, but I see it different. I can see it where because of like the things that happened with the Willie Lynch and all that other stuff.
Yes. The Willie Lynch letter. Yep.
I can see that in that form, but I can also
Hmm.
hip hop music and how it's glorified, and with movements like we have now, where it's like, all right, let's big up the black woman and like let's put down the black man, to where it's like you don't know who you are, you start to feed towards your more primal sense. So it's like, all right,
Mm.
let me just try to control what I can control.
Yeah.
It's like if I can't control everything, I control nothing, then I'm gonna leave. Because remember, like I always tell my friends now, like who doesn't take care of their kids now, right? Nowadays,
Mm.
right? If
Yep.
I know somebody to take care of their kids, it's not my friend. I'm like, yo, dude, what are you doing? We have the means.
Hmm.
But then you think about like what put that in place. Men were going into how like they were fighting with their wives on Fridays and Saturdays. Then they said, okay, yo, if you go to jail on Friday and Saturday, you're not gonna get out till Tuesday. Then it's like, oh, you know what? I'm not gonna go to jail. I'm gonna be easy, or I'm not gonna go home, right?
Mm.
And then it's like, okay, and then it's like, okay, if you don't go home, you can't do this, you can't drive, you can't do this, you can't do that, or you pay child support. And then what happens?
Hmm.
And then now it's like, okay, that's not an excuse anymore. It starts to normalize what's going on. But I tell you this, Haiti is the only country where domestic violence is not a crime
Mm.
in this hemisphere. And
Strange, right? Yeah.
that's if a government can't agree on that, that's where there has to be like there's a power, and you see it now. But I tell you this, I have a friend who's a police officer, right? He's a Haitian
In
American.
Haiti or here?
Yeah.
Yep.
And his father's like, wash the bathtub for me, or wash the bathtub, something like that. And it's like that emasculation, or you don't eat until I get to the table.
Mm.
His father don't work. But he sees that, and it's like, come on, man. The cost of living in New York, he can't leave his mother like that. He can't leave his father like that without a house. But his father's like, he feel like his father's so naive. Because remember, see, you're successful. There's a lot of people that came to America, and even in Haiti, that just naive to it. Just like, yo, I don't care. There's gonna be food on the table.
Then we've got a whole lot to work on. The mentality has to change.
Right.
For a lot of people, whether a lot of black people, whether you're in Haiti or you're in country. If we speak about this country for, black people in this country, how many of them truly understand? Like we know, okay, we went through slavery, we had the Emancipation Proclamation, but I think part of the problem is because of the indoctrination, we've been taught very little about our own history. We learn American history, but it's been more white American history than an inclusive American history. Because I think a lot of young black people growing up, they seem to grow up with this idea that for the past few hundred years, black people never really fought hard enough to change their condition. Because that's what we've been taught. In North America, there were more than 300 slave revolts. And people are like, what? Get out of here. They've heard about Nat Turner. They've heard about, some of them have heard about Charles Delon. Some of them I've heard about the Stono Rebellion, but that's about it. But there were more than 300 slave revolts. And just recently, I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and I mentioned to him that, did you know that one of the largest slave revolts in this country was the Cherokee Rebellion, where black people who were enslaved by the Cherokee Indians escaped, more than 300 of them. It's like, what? The Indians loved us. Some of the Native Americans got along very well with black people. Black people settled with them when they escaped. But if you escaped and went to the wrong Native American nation, like the Cherokee, the Sioux, the Cree, they would enslave you just like the white people did. And the Cherokee was a very large slave-holding population.
They claim it like, oh, I'm Cherokee.
Yeah, yeah, and they're proud of it. But
Yeah.
then how many of them actually know? And even, after we speak about Charles Delon with Nat Turner's rebellion, how many people know that Nat Turner was influenced by the Haitian Revolution? And similar, the people who escaped from the Cherokee, they were trying to make their way to Mexico
Right.
because Mexico had abolished slavery since 1829. And interestingly enough, when Mexico abolished slavery, Texas was part of Mexico, but Americans were living in Texas with their enslaved people. And the Mexicans gave them 1 year extension for them to get rid of the enslaved people because they said anyone who steps foot on Mexican soil was a free person.
Right.
But they didn't listen. 1836, we hear about the Alamo. But how many people actually know what the Alamo was all about? The Alamo was about abolishing slavery. And the Mexican government gave the people in Texas three separate warnings. Said, we warned you before that slavery has been abolished in this country. If you keep these enslaved people here, we'll need to come in there and basically free them ourselves. And that's what the Alamo is all about. Mexicans went into Texas, which is their land. We're going to free these people that you keep in chains here. American history doesn't tell you that.
I think that it does, but I tell you this:
Mm-hmm.
people want like the feel good story more than the actual story.
Yeah.
Like to live in a capitalistic society, like you have to have something, you have to get means, and you have to just keep
Yes.
your wealth, right?
Yep.
That's here. Wherever else, like you have to abide by the rules. Nobody cares that somebody else is doing something and this infringing on your thing because like okay, if there's a riot going on and you have to go to school, like what's more
Mm.
important to you right now? Like that's how in America, that's how it is, right? But in Canada or in Haiti, it might be different. But at the end of the day, like in 3 days, nobody's gonna care about what you did, but your grade still matters, right?
Yep.
We care so much here about what like we think is going to make the difference because we're not used to being part of something bigger than ourselves. So we don't
Mm.
put ourselves as big as we can be. As far as like I feel like as far as black people here. But then when you start to like look at that and you say, okay, why couldn't I do this? Why couldn't I do that? And then you say
Mm.
that I can and I should, and then you start to do it. It's a little bit different. But I think that
Yes.
so many caught in the think about it. Who do like most black Americans look up to? It's all entertainers. And like that's
Yeah.
not gonna get you anywhere, right? Because like that's like one in a billion,
Yes.
right? And then you say to yourself, okay, if I can't be this, the next best thing is like an entrepreneur, but I'm a drug dealer first, or I'm this first. But it's like that's not how it works.
Yeah.
Nobody tells you. And I was talking to my mom today about it. She's like, "Well," I was like, "Yo, I look for so many people to help me with my audio." And I was like, she's like, "Oh, maybe they're not telling you." I'm like, "Oh, no, maybe they don't know because people come and like they touch the things and they do what they can do for me and they try."
Mm.
And I'm like, "Well, to be a learner and to be a leader is different. Like some
Yeah.
people guess things and it works for them and they leave it the same, but to be able
Mm.
to know something that's like somebody can put their own insurance by, that's
Yeah.
and that's why we get so many, 1 in a million people because people work hard and they get it, but they can't pass it on,
Yeah. Yeah. Good point.
you know. I always tell my father, I'm like, "Hey, like what you teach me?" You know what I mean?
Mm.
It's like little things, but it's never like anything like, well, oh, I taught you how to like balance a checkbook, or I taught you how to do like practical things. So it's like, okay, as an adult, I'm learning that on my own. I don't blame him. I'm just saying that, like, if you look at it, that's what it is, right? It's just that. Like, the life is so fast, you don't realize what your parents don't teach you because it's like, all right, just go to school, go do this, go do that. It's not like, nah, how'd you do it?
Do you think throughout the ages, a lot of our parents have basically taught us how to live in this capitalist system, or have they taught us basically how to live as Black people who want to be part of this capitalist system?
My parents never raised me like that. So like my
Yep.
mom always raised me like, look, you could do whatever you want to do, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
so you can do whatever you want to do. I seen it like, okay, if you black, this is what's gonna happen. But I always looked at it like, if you show me the rules, like that's what it was. And even if somebody
Mm-hmm.
it was equal, whatever, I never looked at anything. Like I always knew I had to work harder. That's how last time my mom showed me, but she never showed me like to go into anything with fear.
And I think you're one of the lucky ones. You're one of the lucky ones because unfortunately, I think a lot of our people have been so discouraged. A lot of that discouragement came from their upbringing where they grew up with a lot of parents that were so frustrated themselves, didn't know exactly where they're going, that they're passing the frustration to their kids.
When I grew up Haitian, it wasn't easy. It was like even like to admit that you was Haitian. But I
Yeah.
saw
Oh,
the change. You know what I mean? I saw
oh,
the
I know it well. Yep.
yeah. I was born in America, but ever since my uncles and everybody that were in America, I never seen like poverty. My wife is white, and like
Mm-hmm.
stuff she talk about how she grew up. I'm like, man, I wish more people heard that story because we never like in a Haitian house. You could have friends over, and it would never be like, oh, they got to go home because we got to eat. It was never like
Mm-hmm.
right because you could always there's always enough soul spot for everybody. So
Yes, always.
like that. So my mindset was different. I was like, yo, people just making fun of us because they don't know us. But it was like we ate dinner every night. Like so to me, like Haitians are we were always conservative into where we would keep it in the house. We would never disrespect police. That like to me, like that stuff started happening in late 2010s after that.
Yep.
But we would never like tell people they had to go home because we couldn't eat. Like
No.
if my mother or my grandmother gave somebody money, gave me money, they would just give my friends the money too. So
Yes.
I don't know where like this whole like impoverished Haitian came from,
Hmm.
but it started
That's a
that.
good question.
Yeah, everybody in Haiti want to be a doctor or a lawyer or engineer. Like when I got married in Costa Rica, and it just happened to be the week of this top 100 Haitian convention. This brother right here, we wound up connecting, and he's
Wow. Okay.
in the country.
Hmm.
You know,
Wow.
so that's my whole thing about this. It's like he's there, he's successful. His father,
Hmm.
like he was there like 3 generations in Haitians,
Hmm.
and it was like 100 Haitians there. So I was like, okay, I'm just lucky to be here. But I connected with these people, and it was like, okay, he was like, oh brother, you saw that on the airplane. I'm gonna send you an autographed copy so you can show your friends. And he was just like
Hmm.
nonchalant about it.
Yep. Wow. See, now, how did it make you feel to meet people like that? Didn't it uplift you when you met that doctor and those other, 100 Haitian people? I mean, wasn't that an uplifting feeling? Don't you think that if more young people would have that kind of experience and meet these people, do you think it would change their outlook on life?
Hey, I can't say it would because I tell you this, man. Like I know you, right? And you're an engineer. So like I don't really meet like irresponsible, like bad Haitians. So like to that's what they teach us. But like every time I meet somebody that's Haitian that's older, like of course you can have your outliers, but I it's
Yeah.
that to me. You know what I mean? Well, maybe I'm lucky, like you said. Like, okay, I got to meet 100 Haitian, successful Haitians, doctors, lawyers, and everything. And I know an engineer, but to me, that's everybody. I know an engineer you know, that's texting me about basketball right now.
Yeah.
He's Haitian, and he went to Holy Cross. He went to St. John's. It's the same thing. So and I'm best friends with his cousin. So it's just like I don't know. Sometimes you think about like what people tell you people are, but I just don't know it like that. Like for somebody to say,
Hmm.
"Oh, Haitians is this," like when people used to tell me when I was little, like, "Oh, Haitians is dirty," I was like, "All right, what are you talking about?" Because my grandfather drove a Porsche, and your father,
Hmm.
but I don't know. You see
Yeah.
what I'm
Yep.
maybe I'm spoiled or whatever, or I'm this or that and third. But I'm like, it's like, look, your mother's cooking out a bag. My mother makes juice call out bar every night. Like my mother cooks every night. What are you talking about? I just
Hmm. Yeah. I think for a lot of people, whether you're Haitian or Black American, the upbringing makes a real big difference because the drive that you have, just imagine if you grew up with parents, uncles, and aunts who did nothing but discourage you every time you had an idea that, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But if you grew up with people discouraging you, your life could have been so different right now. But I'm pretty sure as you are growing up, like you said, your mom told you, hey, you could be whomever you want, you could do whatever you want. Let nobody stand in your way. So it really makes a big difference. But I think, unfortunately, for a lot of us, whether you're Haitian, whether you're Black American, unfortunately, for a lot of us, we had parents who only knew about struggle in their lives. A lot of them were not too educated. A lot of them, all they knew, they just knew how to struggle. And unfortunately, the way they express themselves with their young children, has a long lasting effect on them. Imagine growing up with a mother who tell you, you're no good. You're just like your father. You're gonna turn out just like your daddy. And unfortunately, a lot of people grow up in these circumstances and they sort of grew up messed up.
No, you're right. I think, and now that you say that, I kind of empathize with it to the point that, like, I feel like this is the best time in the world right now, right? I say this. My mom might have went through that, and that's why she was so adamant about not having me go through that, right?
Yep, to make sure you have a better life than she did. Yeah.
So my uncles would tell me stories about how like my grandfather, changed alarms when he was
Hmm.
in America. I couldn't picture my grandfather doing that because he was such a G. Like he was such a prominent person. I couldn't even picture him going under somebody's car. You see what I'm
Hmm.
saying? But
Yeah.
that's my perception because that now I see the image of what he wanted me to see.
Hmm.
A Porsche and he had a BMW. He had cars. So I never
Yeah.
thought about him changing an alarm. Him? What? My uncle told me that I thought he was lying.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So,
Wow.
but now I never look at it like I never want my son to see a hard day. You know what I mean? And I think that's
Yep.
growth. Like my son thinks that he could stand on top of cars with his golf club. He's 2. That's what I
Hmm.
want him to feel like. You see what I'm saying? So I
Yeah.
saying is 100% right, but I think that is growth like this with age comes maturity. So I feel like if you
Yep.
stuck in the past, and I think that like at least from a Black American side, and I haven't seen it, and I'm black, I'm half black, half Asian. So when I see
Yep.
like Black American side, there's a lack of growth, right? And there's a lack of growth for some Haitians, but in my family, I don't see it. I've never seen it.
Yeah. Yep.
Blacks on my Black American side is always like, look, I'm gonna pay the mortgage, I'm gonna pay the bills. but the entrepreneurship side of it kind of lacks a little bit. But that's what it is. It's like, all right, we got a good job. They gave us a job. We're gonna do the job.
But do you
That's
think it's because a lot of people have been discouraged?
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Daniel, thank you very much. And
Yep.
I love this conversation, and we need to have conversations like this more. So I
Oh
appreciate
yeah. Let me know. It was good talking to you, man.
of course,
Yep.